My name is Esther Dörendal. I'm an ecologist and I'm working since almost 20 years now on water, environment and climate challenges in International Development Cooperation, and I will guide through this session today. Just before we get into details, the session will be recorded like the other sessions in this conference, so it will be made available afterwards, and if you participate, it means that you grant permission to the recording, and if you would not like to be recorded, please leave the session. Also very important, please turn your cameras and microphones off. And if you want to post any questions to the speakers, please do so in the MST chat. And you can also give thumbs up to questions of interest to you. The session covers some findings from a recent GIZ study that will be launched in November this year. And the study addresses how climate resilience can be approached in watersheds by merging concepts and mechanisms from two leading approaches in water management and ecosystem thinking, namely integrated water resources management, or in short IWRM, and ecosystem-based adaptation, in short EbA. The agenda includes a short introduction, just a 5 minutes glance into the background and the contents of the study, and we'll then in greater detail focus on two case studies that we have analyzed in detail. So we will look deeper into a transboundary case study from the Nile Basin, and I'd like to warmly welcome Mr. Sadiki Luta Leiser. He's a wetlands management expert and since more than 15 years working in the field of transboundary natural resources management and adaptation to climate change. And he will introduce the concept of ecological flows assessments, or just e-flows, in the Mara River Basin, which is shared between Tanzania and Kenya. Mr. Leiser's input will be very interesting with regard to actually shaping the scene or developing entry points as a first step to support mainstreaming EbA into water resources management. The third presentation will address a highly relevant case study from Thailand on merging EbA and IWRM at the policy level. So I'd like to warmly welcome Dr. Samkiat Apipatanavis, the Director of the Water Resources Technology and Innovation Center of the Office of the National Water Resources in Thailand. Dr. Apipatanavis will share with us his in-depth knowledge and experience on how to integrate EbA into national and regional water policy and planning processes. The final slot will address questions as raised from your side to the speakers. And as mentioned, you can give thumbs up also to questions that others have already raised so that we see what is most important to you. So quickly to the background of the study. The study was conceptualized and financed by the global GIZ project Mainstreaming EbA that aims for knowledge development on EbA and knowledge exchange. They act as a knowledge broker. And if you're interested in further information, please check both these websites that I mentioned here, the Panorama platform and the Adaptation Community Net. So why actually this study? So the study was developed to foster knowledge generation on integrated thinking from a water, environment and climate perspective, as integrated thinking is so hard to achieve with these silos that still exist between the different sectors. And in this way to safeguard global water resources in the face of climate change. It starts with a conceptual analysis of IWRM and EbA and the rationale behind merging the approaches. I will get back to this a little bit later. It then looks deeper into 9 practical examples of projects around the world where both approaches have been merged conceptually and practically. From the case studies, we derived key lessons on how to design new coupled approaches or how to merge integrated thinking into projects that are already running. And we conclude with guiding principles on how to proceed and future needs. So at this stage, the results are still preliminary, so we will not get into details here, but we will be very happy to receive your feedback and enter into discussion after the final launch of the study in November this year. So why actually merging IWRM and EbA? I think we all know the terms, but I'm very sure that there will be as many different interpretations of the concepts as we're meanwhile experts in the session. So I think it's worthwhile briefly introducing the rationale of the study so that we all share the same understanding. So water is the, oh, sorry, just a second. I've got a technical problem, just a second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, yes. Great.
Yeah.
So water is the key resource for human well-being and ecosystem health, and vital for most economic sectors. And the pressures on the global water resources are increasing, along with population growth, growing water demands that go hand in hand with economic development, and climate change is further aggravating the situation. And healthy ecosystems can help adapt to the negative impacts of climate change on and through the water resources. So they can increase water availability in adequate quantity and buffer impacts of extreme events. So what is IWRM? It's meanwhile the global paradigm for water resources management since almost 30 years. It is multi-sectoral, it's catchments-based, it's participatory, so it moved away from a technocentric perspective on water resources management. It supports sustainable social. Now somebody took over the control of the presentation. It supports sustainable social and economic development without compromising ecosystem health, and it comprises principles, mechanisms, and tools as published or collected and published by the Global Water Partnership Toolbox. And it acknowledged that climate change impacts can endanger all these principles and objectives of IWRM. So it addresses climate resilience as key theme, but it has not yet accepted the need to think climate change adaptation through in all water management approaches. So it lacks a systematic climate proofing of water management thinking to safeguard water security. And it also lacks to promote the strengths of healthy ecosystems to adapt to climate change. So what is EbA? EbA was recognized as a holistic approach for climate change adaptation in 2010 by the CBD-COP. And since then, it has developed further and is meanwhile defined by different elements, qualification criteria, and standards. So EbA helps people to adapt to climate change and therefore makes active use of biodiversity and is part of an overall adaptation strategy. And due to its strength to increase water availability in adequate quality and quantity and to buffer extreme events, it gets increasingly acknowledged now in national climate strategies like NDCs and NAPs, and it can complement grey infrastructure measures. It doesn't have to be standalone green approaches, but they can go hand in hand with infrastructure measures. And EbA so far has not been interconnected with integrated water resources management. So the strengths of merging the approaches and the rationale behind the study is that integrating both concepts can support climate resilience in watersheds through systematic climate proofing of IWRM, which is yet not anchored in the paradigm, and the proactive development and conservation of healthy ecosystem as part of an overall adaptation strategy for climate resilience, which can be done as green standalone approaches or through combining green and grey measures. So that's the rationale behind, so that we all share the same understanding before we now go into the case studies. And I'd like to welcome now to hand over to the Nile Basin case study and hand over the presentation mode. Sadiki?
Yes, Esther, I guess you're all hearing me. Thank you for the brief and good introductory topic in the integrated water resource management and biodiversity nexus in the globe, and I will be taking you through the case of the Nile Basin Initiative in the Mara Basin. So we in the Nile Basin, we have been working in actually integrating the integrated water resource management with the ecosystem-based adaptation through development of environmental flow assessment in the Mara Basin, a sub-basin in the Nile Basin. And actual environmental flows are the quantities, timing, and quality of water flows that are required to sustain the ecosystems and, of course, support the livelihood. And it is quite important to have the environmental flow assessment because it enhances the consensus and cooperation in water resources in the basin, especially when the resource is transboundary. And the results also are very pertinent into connecting or interlinking the ecosystem or integrated water resources management and ecosystem-based adaptation. So why we conducted the environmental flow in the Mara Basin. We conduct the environmental flow actually in order to ensure that biodiversity is considered in all the development, in socio-economic development, and to balance the growing of water needs based on the growing population. As of 2018, we had close to 400,000 people in the basin, and they are projected to double in 2030. And the water resource will need to be shared amongst the two countries, Kenya and Tanzania, and yet we will need to protect the aquatic ecosystem and as a requirement, as a legislative requirement in the two countries, and of course for supporting the ecosystem services in the region. So what we did, as it is in the Kenyan side, they had already conducted environmental flow and developed a drafty water allocation plan. Then in the Tanzanian side, we were lacking one, and throughout the Nile Basin, we have the guideline for development of the environmental flows in the region. So we domesticated it in the Lower Mara and subdivided the Lower Mara into 8 hydrological units, and we collected samples actually into identifying the requirement for the microinvertebrates, for the fish, for the vertebrates themselves, fish including other bigger mammals, wildlife. Also, we engaged the communities in identifying their requirements, and we also determined the water quality for the basin. Thereafter, after having developed the requirement for the environmental flows for all the facets, we then came to an objective of developing a somehow altered condition which corresponds to a class of B in the draft river classification system for the Tanzanian and of course for the Nile Basin guideline. And we also developed the human basic needs values. As for 2018, they ranged from 0.009 to 0.039 meters cubed per second in the Mara sub-basin. The basic human needs were also developed to be 25 liters per person per day and are expected to remain constantly through the years. So after having developed this requirement for the environmental flow and for human, then we combined the other requirements for the other users, for other water allocation to other users like industries, like agriculture, like pastoralism, and of course, wildlife. And we ultimately developed the environmental flows assessment report, which were endorsed by the Tanzanian government through its national water allocation planning technical team. And thereafter, we we combined the environmental flow assessment report with other requirements, as mentioned, for agriculture, for industries, and for other users, and collected them into a water allocation plan for the Mara River catchment. And in this case, this is where we brought in the environmental flow as the ecosystem-based adaptation tool, and merging it with other users of water in the basin, and develop the water allocation plan, which will be a tool to guide the water use in consideration with the environmental requirement in the region. So to conclude, actually the environmental flow interlinked with the water allocation plan, this infers to actually the ecosystem-based adaptation linkage with the integrated water resources management. And in this case, the resilience of wetland and of course rivers and of course basin requires development and implementation of the environmental flows and the water allocation plans, which include decisions related to how water is allocated, and of course the responses expected in the changes of water availability due to an array of factors including climate change. And in this case, for the Mara River Basin and of course for the Nile Basin, the good news is that the scenarios are showing no much impact of climate change in the near future. And water resource management is therefore based on our study, and this case is a key factor in social, economic, and political development. And in this case, there is a very great requirement for the environmental flow or the based adaptation tools to be integrated in the water allocation at the national level and of course at transnational levels, so that to improve socio-economic and political development. So environmental flows assessment and water allocation plan are two sisters with the ecosystem-based adaptation and of course integrated water allocation, integrated water management accordingly, and important tools in river basin water and socio-economic development, without which we cannot actually have the sustainable development in the region and of course globally. With that note, I thank you for listening, and I will be ready to listen to your comments and perhaps some questions after these presentations. And I guess we'll be now receiving the more detail at the policy level implementation from our colleagues from Thailand. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, is that? Let me scroll over the presentation and then Dr. Samkiat can start.
Lisa?
Yes. Now I think it's working.
Now you go back to I moved back to the beginning of your presentation here. You can start.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, thank you. We can hear you.
Okay, let me start. Dear colleagues, it's my great pleasure to be with you today. I'm Somkiat Pipattanawit, presenting on behalf of the Office of the National Water Resources of Thailand, or UNWR, which is Thailand's lead regulatory water agencies at the focal point of climate change issues within the water sector. With my presentation, I'll give you an insight into Thailand's approach of integrating EbA in the water sector. Thailand's climate policy framework lays some important antipodes for strong roles of water in climate change adaptation, and for IWRM and EbA to be the two guiding concepts for adaptation in the water sector. Not only was the water sector defined as one of the key sectors for climate change adaptation in Thailand, but enhanced water's climate sensitive IWRM was also inscribed as one of the top priorities for adaptation in the Thai nationally determined contribution pledge to the Paris Agreement in 2015. The National Adaptation Plan was subsequently developed to guide the implementation of the NDC, emphasizes EbA as a guiding principle for adaptation in the key sectors. The climate policy framework is an important starting point. However, for sectoral implementation, it is crucial that the water policy framework builds the foundation for the climate sensitive and sustainable water resources management that provides antipodes for the use of green solution. The 20-year water resource management plan that is based on Thailand's National Development Strategy entry into forces in 2018. It is structured into 6 key strategies that provide opportunities to apply nature-based solutions in addition to conventional options of water resource management. The 6 strategies are water for domestic use, water security for production sectors, water, flood and water disaster management, water quality management, conservation and upstream forest rehabilitation, and soil erosion prevention. And final, overall administration and management. Beyond the political and regulatory basis, an enabling factor for EbA in Thailand was also that the UNWR entry into a Thai-German cooperation project that supports UNWR to promote the integration of EbA in the water sector on the national level, as well as through concrete action in Thailand's river basins. Under the water component of the Thai-German climate change program, UNWR is collaborating with GIZ on 5 fields of actions. Every field is action fosters the integration of EbA into existing processes of water sector policies and planning. For national policy development, the cooperation promotes the integration of climate-sensitive IWRM and EbA into national water management strategies and plans. For subnational implementation, we work into pilot basins to develop examples of water-sensitive river basin master plans that I will talk later on the key activities. In the field of Action 3, we look into developing M&E framework to access the benefits of EbA measures. More evidence on the benefit of EbA will help to make informed decision on the best solution for local water management measures and ultimately upscale EbA solution. To increase the scope of financial resources for ecosystem-based adaptation, we are also looking into different public and private financing mechanisms. Last but not least, we focus on international cooperation and exchange on experiences in the integration of IWRM and EbA. For example, in formats such as in this session today. To support the integration of EbA and IWRM on the ground, we are working on Jom and Skakang river basin in lower northern part and the western part of Thailand. The objective is to develop river basin master plans that are based on a comprehensive climate risk vulnerability assessment and will identify suitable EbA options of water, flood and drought risk management for the river basin. To achieve this, we work across different levels, ranging from the national level with other water-related agencies to provincial authorities, river basin committees, and local stakeholders. We emphasize a multi-stakeholder process that is steered by the local river basin committees and includes communities and other water stakeholders. The activities are complemented by the full fresh capacity development program, which includes technical trainings on climate change adaptation, EbA and IWRM, as well as institutional capacity building to run climate-informed and participatory processes. At the same time, we also want to provide concrete guidance and technical know-how for climate-sensitive IWRM and EbA. As a result, we would have a national standard that all the Thai river basin should follow to develop climate-sensitive river basin master plans. A EbA guidebook will guide stakeholders through the assessment and selection processes for EbA, and EbA code of practice should provide technical know-how for water engineers, and other practitioners. To sum up, I would like to highlight some aspects that we consider as enabling factors, challenges, and opportunities for EbA integration in the Thai water sector. First of all, increasing flood events in the past years, together with the most severe droughts in the past 40 years, have significantly contributed to alert the executive levels of water agencies and raise the awareness for adaptation and EbA. Together with the entry point in the water policy framework mentioned earlier, and the participatory approach are more important enabling factors for matching IWRM and EbA for sustainable water management. On the other hand, we still face challenges in making water sector aware of the need for adaptation and for opportunities that EbA can provide. The alignment between water sector policies and climate policy framework is still a new process, but cooperation between the relevant agencies is identifying, and the political momentum is increasing since climate change in Thailand is becoming more and more a reality. Other challenges include from a violence of government agencies and other stakeholders involved in the management of water resources in Thailand, and the still limited knowledge about nature-based solution. This can be also help to facilitate the application for government budget for EbA. So far, it is still limited, and it is hard to define the concrete effects and cost-benefit ratio of EbA solutions as precisely as for great solutions. Building on local knowledge and complementary capacity building, we are convinced that EbA in Thailand will be applied more widely in the future and complement Thailand's IWRM approach in a way that makes Thailand's water sector more climate resilient. With this, I hope that you got some useful insights in Thailand's approach of integrating EbA and IWRM. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Mr. Leiser. Thank you very much, Dr. Apipatanavis, for your insights on the practical side on actually how to merge EbA and IWRM. And there are not yet many questions in the chat, so feel free to write down what comes to your head. Feel free to post questions to the speakers. But maybe there is one that we can start with to Mr. Leiser. So the first presentation was on preparing the ground for mainstreaming EbA into IWRM by developing a knowledge base actually that allows to discuss issues and challenges on water allocation by assigning also the need for water to healthy ecosystems, which is also legally, as I understood, embedded or required in both countries, and to assign water allocation or a certain amount of water to assure the basic human needs. So the question refers to the human needs. So Ms. Parker asked, interesting presentation. I'm wondering why the basic human needs are assumed to remain constant for the next years for the purpose of allocation planning. So Mr. Leiser, maybe you want to reply to this question, please, or also ask on clarification if there is anything you would like to clarify.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Esther, for rephrasing rightly the question and why the basic human need requirements tends to be constant throughout. This is for planning purposes, but those are the international agreed water volumes for human needs in our region, basing on the actual need. However, in the environmental flow assessment and in the water for the reviews of the requirement. As there are so many assumptions made and forecasts, like the requirement for water for agriculture and for other uses will actually decrease basing on the improved technology in agriculture and other uses, and therefore we will be having some extra amount of water to be allocated for human needs. However, the environmental flows and human need are the very this amount of water which cannot be touched, and as of now, those are the minimum requirements, and we cannot go below that, but rather we can go up basing on the availabilities. Thank you.
So thank you, Lothar. So here is a very complex question on IWRM So I think this is raised probably to me. On the conceptual side, yes, IWRM has been criticized a lot, and especially for not acknowledging the governance perspective in enough detail, or also a political economy perspective. And I agree that these are highly relevant topics, because you always have to acknowledge the context to reach something, especially if participation is so important within this framework. We note the criticism on IWRM within this study, but it doesn't go in depth into this. It rather tries to actually grasp the good sides of it. So moving away from technocentric solutions and thinking in an integrated manner. And integration is always a challenge, as we all know from the silos that exist between the sectors. So having this paradigm since more than 30 years, I think, is an asset itself, and it still needs to learn and develop further. And here the point in the study is that actually IWRM is endangered in its principles through climate change, and climate change doesn't get acknowledged in enough detail. So context is always the most important to get somewhere, but the focus here, or the point here, or the rationale is a little bit different. But I'm very welcome or free to enter into discussion with you on that also after the session. So you're welcome to contact me through the event app. So there is another question. Let's move to Thailand already. See if there's anything on Thailand yet. Not yet. But what I think would be very interesting is also to learn more from the Thailand side on how important is actually a well-functioning collaboration at the national level between the sectors, so that you could reach so far. You mean you have one of the highlights here in the case studies on how this actually works in practice, and I'm sure, like in other countries, collaboration is a big challenge, but how important is it that actually the sectors do collaborate with each other to get that far? And what can we learn from this for other countries? So maybe Dr. Apipatanavis, you could elaborate on this a little bit more.
Oh yeah, thank you for your question. First of all, I would like to start with the in Thailand, we have different agencies. One taking care of climate change, and in the national waters, Ministry of National Waters, National Resources, and our office is in taking care of water resources. So they're looking for the policies for climate change, adaptation, mitigation. But in water resources, we're just looking for how to manage water within the next, we have like 20 years master plan. We are not pay more attention on the climate change adaptation. So what we found that if we collaborate with them, they call ONEP, taking care of their climate change. They would, we would develop kind of policies that adapt CCA climate change adaptation within the water sector. So right now we kind of have a MOU between our office and ONEP to develop joint activities like high-level policy dialogue on climate change adaptation and EbA in water sector. And we are going to have a joint policy brief series, kind of like that. So it would be really useful if we can develop this kind of policies. It would be a good example for the audience. Thank you.
Great, thanks. There are, I think, 3 more questions that I would quickly give forward to the speakers. They're both really interesting, and I'm also interested in learning about the answers. So one first to Mr. Leiser is on how the EBA now, how the joint work on EBA in the Mara actually fosters enhanced cooperation in the Nile region. So maybe quickly to the background, it was EBA, the EBA framework was developed through the Nile Basin Initiative. So maybe Mr. Leiser can, in a 1 minute, reply to this, and the other one to Dr. Samkiat afterward for also a 1 minute. It's about the preference or prevalence of grey infrastructure measures to adapt to climate change, and the question how the green measures can complement this, or how what the perceptions of the communities are to work with green measures rather than conventional infrastructure measures that are better known. And I think then both of you have 1 more minute, and then the session is closed, but I would welcome you all to contact the speakers also through the event app and continue with the discussion there. So Sadiki, maybe again on the Nile, the role of the Nile Basin in this context.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esther. Actually, this is a very good question from my friend Diego, and as previously, environmental flows assessment in the 9 Nile Basin sub-basins, and we are developing transboundary management plans and of course transboundary investment projects, and we are pushing and we are working with the countries and financiers into developing the green infrastructure projects, and we are actually forging collaboration in the region. So it isn't only for the Mara, but it is within, and this is the pilot, which is actually being replicated throughout countries and throughout the whole 10 countries in the Nile Basin through the wetland management. Thank you.
Thanks, Sadiki. And maybe another, maybe the last question to Dr. Apipata Navis about the acceptance of green measures compared to grey measures actually to adapt to climate change.
Yes, for local community or local government, they accept the nature-based solution, since they have, like as I said earlier, that climate change is kind of reality in Thailand. So people pay more attention for ecosystem-based adaptation. So I would mention about some example of EBA, like we call living weir. It was built by the nature material. So people taking care of this kind of weir, and it make the community provide water in the dry season, kind of like that. And also we have kind of like retention pond. So this kind of I would say great structure that people are supporting this kind of structure. And also with ONWR, with GIZ, we also have a program under the TGCP program. That is, I've also mentioned in my slide, the MNE system to evaluate how benefit the community or the society get from the project. So with this result from this project, it would prove to the society or the community that it's worth to proceed for this kind of nature-based or EBA adaptation. So I would say people pay more attention and looking forward to get more and more kind of project like this.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So thanks first of all to everybody here listening to our session, and we're very keen on presenting the study to you as soon as it will be finished. We're going through the last feedback rounds right now before it will be published. And last but not least, the last question on the importance of NAPs. Yes, I think every policy document from any sector is a good tool to promote EbA, because different people will work with different national policies. So maybe to Mr. Führen now the last reply, yes, wherever it can be mainstreamed, it should be done. And yeah, thanks to everybody, and we are looking forward to the next session now.